Well, forget stimulus one and talk of stimulus two. You want to stimulate our economy, then start dishing out more food stamps and welfare. A flip side you're only going to hear on Forbes on Fox. Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us. Here with us today, publisher Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Neil Weinberg, along with Mike Ozanian, Evelyn Rusli, and Quentin Hardy. Neil Weinberg, more welfare and food stamps? How's that going to stimulate the economy?
I'm not saying I agree or disagree with stimulus, but if the point is to stimulate the economy, you want to get the money out the door. And these are spoon-ready programs. 97% of this money that you send out in food stamps gets spent that month. In addition, we have over 30 million people who are relying on this, and for every dollar you send out, about $1.4 gets spent. So you create jobs along the way. This is a stimulus.
But, Mike, I thought we all agreed in the 90s, the Democrats with Clinton and the Republicans, that welfare is a drag not only in the economy but on the individuals who take it.
Absolutely. Look, everybody knows this is a failed policy. It does not stimulate the economy. All it accomplishes is either increasing the government debt or taking money from one person and handing it to another person. It does not grow the economy.
And, Quentin, doesn't it create a sense of dependency very often on the people who take it?
Shame on you, David. Ronald Reagan never did produce his welfare queen. That's a myth. The fact of the matter is,
wait a minute. It's not just Ronald Reagan. Also, Bill Clinton said the same thing, Quentin.
It's a myth. They couldn't produce them. These people are poor and they are hungry, and you feed them. That's what we do. Does it stimulate the economy? It's not the issue. Look, the fact of the matter is we had this tax cuts to the rich economy that didn't work. We had your house as a cash machine didn't work. We got a credit overhang so small business can't get loans. You got to work through those things. But meantime, you feed the poor.
Rich Karlgaard, again, if it was just a matter of money going from the government to feeding the poor, I think a lot of people wouldn't have a problem. But that sense of dependency on the part of recipients does anything but stimulate the economy.
Quentin doesn't know what he's talking about. The Reagan Revolution produced a 25-year boom. Unemployment averaged 4 or 5% over that period of time, and now it's 10%. So, you know, we got to stimulate with the right stuff.
Evelyn, what do you think?
We have to look beyond the risk of dependency. When you have unemployment at 9+%, that's a problem. Now, the thing with food stamps, it is a quick jolt to the economy because not only does it feed people, but that money that goes towards food will help local businesses as well as those big stores, those supermarkets, and that will in turn encourage job growth.
So is it a stimulus or not?
At the margins, yeah, and you do have to protect the poor. But you ask the poor themselves what they want. They say they don't want food stamps, they want jobs. And how do you create jobs? Rich is absolutely right. You talk about a multiplier effect. We didn't need a corporate bailout. We needed a corporate tax cut. That would have created jobs for the poor. You know, the multiplier effect for corporate tax cuts is $1 to $2. Neil says 1 to 4 for stimulus spending. No, tax cuts are way more effective, and some say 1 to 3 as a 1 to 3 multiplier effect. They're better than a bailout.
Wouldn't jobs be a better solution, Neil?
Jobs would be a better solution, but as Quentin pointed out, the problem is we're not creating them right now. So if we agree that a stimulus is good, and I'm not saying I agree, but if what you're trying to do is stimulate and actually get economic activity today, tomorrow, this month, this works better than creating jobs because the jobs are going to take a while to show up.
Rich, what about that? There may be a time lag from the time that you propose the tax cuts to the time that jobs are actually created.
Well, yeah, there might be a time lag of a few months, but you got to do the right things to ensure that you have a boom that lasts 5, 10 years, just as the Reagan Revolution that produced a boom that lasted 25. Now we're in a world of hurt. CEOs are too demoralized to hire people.
Quentin, you're always touting the growth during the Clinton administration, and it's true stock market went up after '94 and everything seemed to be rosy. Didn't a lot of that have to do with the fact that states didn't have to put out all this welfare money?
Look, I may not know what I'm talking about, but I do know the unemployment rate was real high under Mr. Reagan for a couple of years, and the poor suffered, and they need to be fed. It was his defense spending and a lot of federal spending that made a big difference and kickstarted things. As Rich can tell you, North Dakota is doing well right now, and it gets more federal money per capita than any other state. Government spending can make a positive difference.
All right, well, Mike, we're not getting an answer from Quentin about the Clinton administration, but the fact is, during the Clinton administration, they changed welfare policies dramatically. The Republicans and Dems agreed to cut it back, and we had a boom.
Well, government spending overall was held in check, and cutting back on welfare spending was a big part of it. And if you look at periods when we had increases in welfare spending, well, guess what? welfare rolls went way up, like in the 1960s. If you increase welfare payments, your welfare number of people on welfare is going to increase, which is bad. You don't want that, Whitney.
Yeah, and actually people on the welfare rolls, they don't want this culture of dependency. They don't want to be trapped on the food stamp line. They want a job. So how do you get the jobs? And, you know, by the way, North Dakota, that could be a sign that the bailouts, the stimulus plan is failing. You want that money funneled toward states like Nevada or Michigan, where the unemployment is really high. So how do you create jobs? I think Rich and Mike, they're asking the right questions. How do you do it? How do you get companies to hire again? Corporate tax cut. We're one of the highest in the world in corporate tax rates.
But fundamentally, it's not just about dependency here. It's about being able to put food on the table. For these families that don't have jobs currently, that's really the only way they can do that is through food stamps. And on the issue of whether or not this is a burden on local governments, the food stamp program is a federal program that actually might ease the burden on state governments.
Look, everybody wants to help the poor, but what's the best way to help them? Keeping them on the dole, or do they want to be productive? I would say the poor really do want to be productive and make money for their own families.
I think the problem is everyone's talking about social policy. We need to feed the poor. We need to create incentives for capitalism. But the point is we're trying to stimulate the economy here. That's the point of this bill. Mike, what would you do? What would be a faster stimulus here?
I would say tax cuts across the board. Top marginal rates should be cut drastically, and I would cut way back on government spending. And we need a policy from the Federal Reserve where we have a sound dollar. That's
and so
key.
Everyone will go to the mall
Rich
today?
Karlgaard, I see you smiling. What's that Cheshire smile all about?
Well, the Cheshire smile is that, you know, the American venture capital industry has created one job for every $30,000 of investment over the last 30 years. You know, that's the kind of multiplier effect we're talking about, and you get that by cutting the marginal rates on capital gains. And Elizabeth is exactly right about the corporate tax rate, and maybe it should be linked to jobs. You know, we have the second highest in the world behind Japan, and Japan has not been a job creation machine over the last 20 years either.
Evelyn, you were touting the multiplier effect. Doesn't it work better in the private sector than it does in the public sector?
Sure, but I think tax cuts are good for the long run. But in addition to that, when you have a crisis, when you have unemployment high, then you should use food stamps and other welfare programs in order to get spending in the system as soon as possible.
Well, what about as a very short-term solution to a problem?
It's terrible. You give a person a food stamp, he eats today, but he's not going to eat tomorrow. You give him a job, he can eat for a long time.
That's the last word, ladies and gentlemen.